Hi, my name is Zach Cusack, and thank you for tuning in for this episode of Sales Business Magic. Today I will be discussing the power of influence in sales and business development and 10 key components which can help you generate relationships, generate rapport, and ultimately generate the sale. Alright, the first aspect that I will be talking about in the power of influence is getting someone to do a favor for you. The theory behind that is if someone does the favor for you, they are more likely to rationalize that you must have been worthy of doing a favor for and decide that therefore they must like you, and ultimately the relationship begins to blossom. The second component in the area in the power of influence is aim high. Ask for way more than you want at first, then scale it back at later. It kind of goes along with the process of buying something very expensive, or a sales rep when you're approaching a client and you're talking about all the various products that you have. Say, for example, with office furniture. When you're approaching a client and you're talking about a product which is on the higher end and far more expensive, and then you pitch them on an idea which is half that price, of similar quality, that idea is that it may not be that much money, and ultimately it'll be easier for the client to convince himself that it's worth spending that money on. The third most important power of influence factor is using a person's name. When you use a person's name or their title, it helps you feel connected. It helps the prospect feel as if you're a friend of theirs, as if you have a relationship, because you're speaking to them directly on a first name basis. Like Chris or Maria. You know them and you're able to relate to them directly on specific names, and ultimately you're developing a relationship. The fourth component is flattery. Some people find this hard to believe, but flattery will actually get you everywhere. You need to be careful though, because if it's not sincere, it can actually do more harm than good. So when you're developing relationships with people, pat them on the back for the hard work they do. If they're a leader of an organization or if their role within the company, credit them for the hard work and the contributions that their work means directly for their organization. The fifth component is mirroring a prospect's behavior. So if a prospect is crossing his legs, or if he's itching behind his ear, mirroring those behaviors, studies actually show that people find that to be favorable, and ultimately they react and they use that influence in when they're making their decisions on whether or not to buy from a prospect or not. The sixth component of the power of influence talks about asking for favors when the prospect is tired. And why so is people have a natural moral obligation to stick to their word. And when they do this, when you ask for a favor and the prospect agrees to doing that favor for you, albeit they're tired, they still have agreed, and ultimately they're more likely to stick to their word because of the moral aspects behind that. There was a great movie, and I'm sure most all of you are aware, The Godfather. That line, "You're going to make an offer you can't resist." Well, that's also how you look at sales and with influence. Is start with a request that they can't refuse. A small request, a minimal request, something that's easy and not difficult for the prospect to accomplish or get aside. And then you'll be able to work your way up the ladder and ask for more and more, and ultimately generate the business, generate the sale. The eighth component of the power of influence that I'll be talking about is when you're having a conversation with a prospect client and the prospect actually mentions a fact that you know is not true. Don't correct people when they are wrong. Instead of arguing, focusing on listening, and then explain the common ground that you have. And share that with them, using this point as a starting point to explain your position. Don't correct them and say you're right, you're better, but rather find ways to relate their point to what your position is and explain your position. So, don't correct people and create an argument, but rather let them describe their position and ultimately learn more from that and relate your position to what it is you're trying to accomplish. The ninth factor is repeat stuff. Paraphrase people and repeat back what they are saying so you ensure that you're on the same page. And with this helps increase your credibility, and ultimately it helps you develop more relationships because you're on the same page and you guys have a clear understanding of X, Y, and Z needs to be accomplished. In order for you to accomplish X, Y, and Z, you have a clear understanding by repeating this stuff back and paraphrasing what people says ultimately helps increase your level of influence. And the final component of today's discussion is with the power of influence is when you nod. And you nod a lot while talking, especially when leading up to asking a favor. It seems as if you know more about what it is you're talking, and it creates the idea that what your idea or the favor that you're asking for has quite a bit of significance towards the conversation, the relationship that's being generated. And remember that with the power of influence, it's not about to say what you're doing is right or what you're doing is better, but it's about influencing and creating an atmosphere of you being the expert in what it is, the particular business venture that you're discussing. And when you increase that level of influence, you increase your level of expertise, and ultimately you develop more of a stronger relationship as a business professional. Now, you remember this, that with sales, it's similar with life insurance. You don't sell life insurance, you sell what life insurance can do. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Sales Business Magic and on the power of influence.